I'm Ched Myers, and welcome to the sixth and final segment of our Sabbath Economics program. In this last segment, Andy Loving continues to explicate the prospects of community investing and gets into details about how we can move money from Wall Street to Main Street as a very practical and effective way of economic sharing in our time.
What I'm hoping for today is I'm hoping for you to be convinced enough that you'll begin to move money, because it's needed, and there are lots of different choices, so that I think almost anyone can find something, one, that they can do, and they in some sense can feel some connection to. It may be that it's close to where you live, it may be with an issue that really is close to your heart, or you feel a sense of call to. But in some sense, it is a way to practice redistribution. I saw this quote and I love it. A change of heart or values without a practice is only another pointless luxury of a passively consumptive way of life. Honesty is sometimes pretty hard. As a good Baptist who knows a lot about guilt, when I first read this, I said, if I didn't really have good choices or practices to be able to point people to, after reading this quote, it would just be a good practice in trying to heap guilt upon the people who I was listening to me. But the reality is, community investing is such a practice. It is a way to have both a change of heart and then to be able to do something about it. I want to quickly, again, go on and remind you of the situation in our world. Billions of individuals around the world lack access to essential financial services needed for economic opportunity and the ability to build self-sufficiency. Result, widening gap, that disparity of wealth between rich and poor. 50% of the world's population lives on less than $2 a day. 1 in 6 live in extreme poverty on less than $1 a day. And over 12.5% of Americans live below the poverty line. We, in the social investing community, to give you an idea how in some ways how difficult this is, our big goal in the social investing community has been to try and get people to put 1% of their investment portfolio into community investing. And after about 25 years of trying, we recently just made it there. Because so much of community investing is at below market rates, it's probably a bigger testimony to the hold that maximizing profit has upon us, even in the social investing community. That's why so many people in the social investing community love the idea of screened investing, of doing their portfolios and being able to not invest in defense contractors. But the reality is they like that idea that they can just get just as good a return in screened investing as they can in non-screened investing. When we start talking about taking below market returns, the room empties, or it has. I can tell you that these days people are real glad they've done community investing, because they may have only made 2 or 3 or 4%, but they haven't lost 40%. None of those organizations have gone bankrupt or belly up because they've not conducted their business in a way that resulted in the kind of things that have happened to do that. And the next slide is one that's going to show you what has happened when it comes to progress. Even though we've not done much, this gives you an idea of what's happened since 1995. We've seen community investing growth back in 1995 and 97 was at $4 billion. In 2007, top 20, right, almost $26 billion. So we're beginning to see things change, even though we're still a long way from where we want to be. There's where we are, and then the question is, where can I use money that I can put in community development financial institutions? There are lots of places. I want to read it. If you have a money market, a certificate of deposit, a fixed income bond fund, a savings account, a Roth IRA, a regular IRA, an old 401k, an old tax-deferred annuity, an old deferred compensation. So many people have retirement accounts from former employers that they've never done anything with, they've never gotten around to it, or they've retired and they've never done anything with their old 401k or their 403b, and in certain cases you can't, they won't let you, but in most cases you can. All of these are monies that you can put into community investing. Even a couple years ago, there were a lot of community investing instruments that couldn't be put into an IRA because of regulatory issues that said, you're not supposed to put in anything that takes less than a market return. So in some sense, you couldn't do Sabbath economics with IRA money if you wanted to back then. That's not completely true, but for the most part it was. If you have money in at least one of these kind of accounts, that means you've got things that you can put it in. I'm going to start now and tell you just a little bit about some thumbnail sketches of some of these institutions and what they do and what you can do. The first one is Shore Bank. Shore Bank is the largest community development bank in the United States. It works in inner city Chicago, which is where it started back in the early 70s when a bank about to fail. Some local people began to take it over, and the whole idea of community development financial institutions was just coming into being, and they began to work at what does it mean to be a bank where profit is not the only motive or the predominant motive. And they basically transformed the south side of Chicago with a lot of help, but they were a major part of that, mostly in African American communities, now working in Latino communities. Go to that website, they have an online high-yield savings account. FDIC insured. It is a market return. It's right now yielding almost the highest in the nation. It's a great institution doing great things. Right now, they're taking the money from the high-yield savings. What would your money be doing? They've identified 10,000 families in their target area who have adjustable rate mortgages, some of these toxic things that if something doesn't change for those families in the next couple of years, they're going to be in foreclosure. And their goal is to try and to transform by taking those adjustable rate mortgages and offering a fixed rate mortgage to every one of those families. Going back to the idea of how do poor communities build wealth, is they build wealth when people begin to own their own homes. Shore Bank, again, because they were much more interested in what was happening on Main Street instead of Wall Street. They had no exposure to Fannie Mae, no exposure to Freddie Mac, no exposure to AIG, no exposure to Washington Mutual, no exposure to Lehman Brothers. They're just chugging along, doing the work that they do, because they were not interested in saying, where can we make the most money? They were interested in figuring out how can we have the most impact on the communities where we live and where we care. Also, Shore Bank has a bank up in Oregon and Washington that's an environmental bank. It's called Shore Bank Pacific. They make loans in an area where the fight between loggers and environmentalists have been going on, and Shore Bank Pacific is attempting to try and say we can provide jobs and still take care of the environment. And Shore Bank Pacific has that as their goal. So if that's a concern of yours, it's FDIC insured, just like most banks, pays competitive market returns on money markets and CDs. It's a great institution. And then the next one, Self-Help is one of the largest community development credit unions. Again, a community development credit union, by definition, has to serve poor communities. So investment in this institution helps on issues around predatory lending and things like that. They have money market accounts, CDs, government-insured, competitive rates. Some of you may have heard quoted a group called the Center for Responsible Lending, and that's really just a spin-off of Self-Help. It's a group that works specifically on issues around payday lending and predatory lending. The next one is the CRA fund. This is an affordable housing bond fund. It's AAA rated, which means it's safe as almost anything. It's AAA rated, market return for bond funds. It's available at places like Charles Schwab and Company, where I do a lot of work, and at Fidelity. Every dollar that's invested in this is invested in affordable housing and job creation bonds. So this is a fund that does that. Okay, next one. The Calvert Foundation is probably the premier community investing institution in the U.S. $215 million in assets, makes loans to 240 nonprofits, affordable housing groups that make small business loans in poor neighborhoods, microfinance, community nonprofits, even social enterprise loans to groups, fair trade organizations. You can get in with them with as little as $1,000. They're not insured, but 13 years, no investors ever lost a dime. Through all of this, created over 500,000 jobs, built 15,000 homes, and has financed over 6,000 small businesses. This is one where these CCI notes can be bought in your IRA at Schwab and a lot of brokerage houses, even now at Merrill Lynch and places like that. The next one is Oikle Credit. And I know some of you have invested in Oikle Credit, and some of you probably say, I can't even pronounce it, much less invest in it. It's actually a bank that's been around almost as long as any community development financial institution. It has been around. It was started in the mid-'70s by the World Council of Churches as an ecumenical bank for the poor. It's a funny name. Oiko, its base means community, so it's credit for the community. A lot of you know about microcredit, that Muhammad Yunus, who started the movement back in the late 80s and who was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for it a couple years back, found out that poor people actually, if treated with dignity and respect, are great credit risks. Microcredit in most places enjoys repayment rates above 95%. And if you're a woman and interested in helping women, over 75% of the money that Oiko Credit loans to microcredit organizations ends up in the hands of women. A little look at microfinance. There have been lots of rapid growth, lots of change. Assets have more than doubled in microfinance from 2004 to 2006. But look at the bottom. The financing currently is $25 billion out there, but the demand, $275 billion. So the gap is $250 billion. So every dollar helps. And the borrowers currently served $100 million, but the demand now is from organizations that said they could give microfinance credit to over 1 billion people, and it could help them. Oiko Credit makes bulk loans to microcredit organizations that are indigenous, run by people from the countries where they are. They know what they're doing. They've got great records. They don't have enough capital. And that's where Oiko Credit comes in. It's the largest provider of microcredit, private provider outside government in the world. An investment of $25,000 results in loans to about 100 families a year that literally changes, and most cases does change their lives. So if you, in essence, make a 5-year investment of $25,000, you can help change the lives of 500 families. One of the most exciting things about Oiko Credit is that over 75% of the capital that Oiko Credit has comes from individuals and local churches. It's a grassroots movement. It's been funded by the grassroots. It's not been a top-down thing, but it's something that individuals, people like you and me, have done and responded, and it's made a difference. You can invest, again, with as little as $1,000. We actually do it through the Calvert Foundation because they act as a fiscal agent for Oiko Credit, which is based in the Netherlands. It's a community reinvestment fund. Probably most of you have never heard of it, but it's an organization in Minneapolis that finances community development, non-regulated community development groups, those groups that are doing affordable housing, community clinics, and helping those clinics find the financing. As an example, they could sink as much as $1 million in a project. But the way financing works, especially for projects in poor communities, is that that money's tied up until they can pay it off. It could be tied $1 million tied up for 20 years. Community Reinvestment Fund has a way in which they can take that loan out that affordable housing people have, and to give that $1 million back to that local community development corp so they can go out and start a new project. Now we can begin to do that. And we can give money through a foundation called a private label. So you do it through the Calvert Foundation, you can get up to 3%, not insured again. But to give you an idea of what's going on in Southern California right now, a school for special needs kids in Riverside County. It's located in a community that's 35% below the poverty level, 60 emotionally disturbed and mentally challenged youth. Allowed that school to buy a building instead of renting. A children's emergency clinic. Homeboy, how many of you have heard of Homeboy Industries? Okay, CRF has helped Homeboy be able to purchase a building that they were formerly leasing for their silkscreen work. An adult resource center in Linwood, California. Again, you can invest in it with as little as $1,000. I can invest it. You can use your IRA money. All that is true. Next one is Equal Exchange. A lot of you have heard about Equal Exchange. Equal Exchange is doing great work. It's been profitable every year since it began, except for 1 year, about 25 years. And it needs capital. Again, as little as $1,000, 3-year CD. It's not insured. You can get about 3% on it. Great institution. Great institution. I went to Peru with the Equal Exchange 2 summers ago. Went up into northern Peru. Picked coffee. Got to meet some wonderful people. And we sat around and talked with them. We said, what difference does fair trade make to you? And they smiled with the biggest grins I've ever seen and said, the first children ever from our little village are now in university in Lima because of fair trade prices. It changes people's lives. Don't think it doesn't, because I know that it does. And then finally on this, do you remember South Africa? But South Africa is still there. And apartheid is gone, and while blacks have significant political power, most of the economic power still is in the hands of the whites. Shared interests works on that. They're getting capital back into South Africa, working with a partner there, getting money into microcredit organizations, affordable housing, the same kinds of things you've heard before. They're doing great work, but they need our money. And it's a Sabbath economics organization, I can tell you. That's just barely hits the beginning of the number of organizations out there that are doing great and wonderful work and that need our money. Most of them, again, young organizations, still a long way to go. I just can't tell you how excited we are about the potential if people of faith are willing to look at this and begin to understand it, what changes can be made. If you want to do this, if you have a financial advisor, talk to them. I'm required to tell you that I'm an investment advisor representative, a First Affirmative Financial Note. My firm, Just Money Advisors, represents them. So you have to be careful, and I have to tell you to be careful. You need to check it out. Check it out. The one little story I will tell you is that somebody at one of these little conferences came to us and said, Andy, you know, I'll talk to you about this. I got this little IRA. Turned out the little IRA was about $400,000. And so now he had, that person and his wife had they had some other money too. And they put $50,000 at self-help, $50,000 at Equal Exchange, $30,000 at Oil Credit, a bunch of money at the CRA fund, a bunch of money at Shore Bank. And they're changing lives because they caught the vision of what Sabbath economics was about and began to say, I'm going to put my money where my mouth is and do this. I'm a part of a small church, 60 people. We meet in a renovated machine shop. And over the course of about 2 years, helping and challenging each other, this little church was able to put about $180,000 into Oil Credit. We didn't have a clue we could do that. That was $180,000 that we had never thought of as money that we could put to work on behalf of poor people. And we're a justice church. That $180,000 has been laying around for years in our bank accounts and stuff, and we had never thought about it as a resource to be able to in essence, put in the hands of poor people. But we were able to do that. Last thing I'll say, do it now. Don't wait. Don't put it off. Ched and I talk about sometimes what we call the paralysis of analysis. And that is that we liberal churches are really good at saying, I'm just going to figure this out a little bit more, and then I'm going to do something. You know, I want to know, can you give me a little more information? I just want to think about it a little bit longer. And what I'm wanting to say to you here today is, do it now. Do something. Do one of these things now, and then begin to reflect upon it, and then think some more, and then hopefully do some more. One of the things I've learned in doing the work that I do is that people are funny about their money. We all have fears. We all have things that we have trouble doing this. But I can tell you that also, I'll tell you this, is if you're worried about that, I know there are some people in this room from this area who've done it and would love to be able to, would be willing to talk to you and share with you about what they've done and why they've done it. And the other thing that I would say is that if you're interested in this, find out some of those people and do it. Because we need it. And it's exciting. And the last thing, and then I promise I'll get off, that I would say to you is that this is also one of those wonderful things, is that if you have a congregation, most Presbyterian congregations that I know have a very wide range on the political spectrum. But I can tell you that community investing is something that you can sell to the liberals and the conservatives in your congregation. Because you're not asking people in your congregation to give anybody anything. You're asking them to give them a chance. You're asking them to give them opportunity. You can sell it as bootstraps capitalism, I don't care. But the reality is that this is something that I think that almost everybody in most of your congregations, if promoted well and rightly, could do it. So, my last words for you is, don't wait. Do it now.
My name is Marilee Robertson, and I got started on this journey in 1995 in Nicaragua when I attended a workshop for women who were receiving microloans through the WCCN, the Wisconsin Coordinating Committee for Nicaragua. And that's how I learned about microlending. And so when I got back here to the States, I invested a few $1,000s in WCCN. And then I didn't have too much to invest at that time. And later I sold a property, and I wanted to do something with it that would be appropriate. So I consulted with my friends Gloria and Ross Kinsler, and they told me about Oiko credit. And so I had just recently received a sheaf of papers from Bartimaeus Cooperative Ministries because I was beginning to get a little more involved. One of the articles in one of the newsletters was by Andy Loving. And I don't remember a lot that was in it, but the main thing I remember is do something, don't wait around, don't overanalyze, just the thing is to do something. So I just went ahead and I invested a good part of what I had gotten from that income in Oiko credit. Well, then later, Ross and Gloria knew that Andy was going to be in town, and they arranged for me to talk to him. And so as we were talking, we came up with this idea. He suggested that we try to get funds from the Presbyterian Hunger Program and do something in this area, hold some seminars. And so that's exactly what we did. We got the funding, and we did the organizing, and of course now this is our fourth seminar. It has really been transformative for my faith. I've been at this faith business for many, many years, but this has added a dimension that has been extremely important for me.
When I started teaching at Fresno Pacific University, automatically the university sets up a retirement fund for you, and I think Tia Kreff is a national teachers retirement fund. And then I started getting involved in this Sabbath economics thing and learned a little bit about where Tia Kreff is investing its money. And it's not something that is in solidarity with our beliefs and value systems. And Andy Loving helped me get all that money out of there and into self-help. And I just remember that moment when it was switched over, and what a lightness that felt, and how good it feels to realize that the surplus money that we do have is helping folks get homes, and helping folks start businesses, and helping folks that don't have access to money have access to our money. And that is really life-giving for us.
In our current economy, human social relationships are sacrificed for the benefit of accumulating capital. Families are pulled apart, people are moved around, all for the sake of maximizing return on capital. I think part of the mission of Sabbath economics is to reverse that equation and to say the only real value that capital has is to help rebuild social relations. So in that sense, money is put at the service of human relationship rather than human relationship being put at the service of money. And that really begins to open up when you think about retirement, because in our culture, the anxiety that we talked about in this seminar really preys on people. People are concerned, they're anxious, the consciousness of scarcity. Am I going to have enough to retire? Who's going to take care of me? And the culture attempts to solve that through capital. If you are wise in your investments, you can give your money to institutions or people you don't know, and they'll take care of you. That's a very modern solution. The traditional solution, of course, is the people who take care of you in your old age is the clan, the family, the kin, the community, the neighborhood. We think we're moving in the wrong direction by sacrificing, dismantling the clan and the neighborhood and the community and the family so that we all can get wealthy enough to pay people who really don't care about us to take care of us. And so, at least, you know, in theory, to commit our lives to valuing social relationships first seems like a better bet.
Retirement issues for me, I really struggled with when we first started doing Sabbath economics. And part of what has given me security is this community of folks that is struggling with Sabbath economics together and supporting each other together. I believe the people are going to be there when we get old and we need some looking after and someone to care for us. I think because of the years of building this community, the years of struggling about what is Sabbath economics, how do we care for each other now, will translate into how do we care for each other in older age.
We had the experience 7 years ago of caring for my mentor, LaDon Sheets, in a community hospice project. He was someone who had completely devoted his life to people, and he had no money at the end of his life. But what he had was an incredible network of friends and people who loved him. And when he contracted pancreatic cancer at age 68 and immediately had to go into hospice, there's this tremendous upsurge of friends he had cultivated and communities he had cultivated around the country that came together almost spontaneously. And we and one other couple in the Catholic Worker Movement coordinated a 4-month community hospice effort in which people from around the country, more than 100 people, came for periods of time to care for this man who they loved, who didn't have a dime, but who had a community. So when I think about Sabbath economics and retirement and old age and even death and dying, I think of the famous Mark Twain saying when someone asked Mark Twain whether he believed in infant baptism, and he said, "Believe it? Hell, I've seen it." I believe in Sabbath economics, but I've also seen it. And that's what we want to give our lives to rebuild those social relations so that our anxieties can melt into greater realities of human solidarity and mutual aid. Thanks for the time and commitment that you've taken to work through what are really serious and gripping issues of faith and economic justice. We hope you found this DVD helpful and will recommend it to your friends. And we hope you'll pay attention to the credits as they roll, which will give you further information on how to follow up with these practices. Thank you.